Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Franchise Dissection, the show where we examine your favorite horror franchise one entry at a time, asking if it is essential to the franchise as a whole. I'm your host, Alan, and I'm joined by my good friend, Corbin.
What's going on, everybody?
What a strong intro there, bud. Just coming in hot.
I've
I
had
like
some
that.
practice, yeah.
I wonder where you got that practice from.
Yeah, me too.
So, our first franchise on the stretcher has got to be Friday the 13th. It is an absolute classic amongst almost all horror fans. We're going to be tackling the 1980 original, and it's for all of its first-person glory today. So, it had to be Friday the 13th. Today is Friday the 13th on release. It just lined up too perfectly. You can count on Franchise Dissection to be up on our YouTube page every other Friday. Please remember, like, comment, and subscribe. Don't miss out on any of our new episodes. We also have our Discord server where you come hang out and talk all things horror. Links, as always, are going to be in the description. Now, Corbin, let's get into this body. Let's get just hands deep in there. Is this movie just a B movie that, for some reason, became huge?
Yeah, I mean, the correct answer is yes, right? Friday the 13th is a Halloween ripoff. It's an unabashed ripoff. It's a movie that the director and writers made with that intention, and it created its own legacy kind of just randomly, surprisingly, I think, to everybody involved. Yeah.
I was finishing up watching the fourth entry earlier today, and I was just curious. What was the budget for Friday the 13th? $550,000.
Yeah.
Which, in 1980, I mean, that's a good chunk of change, but it's still, I mean, for a movie, that's not a lot. They made $55.8 million.
Yeah.
100 times their investment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wildly successful.
That's why we got 11 more movies.
I mean, it is amazing to me how something can rip off and debatably end up becoming bigger in a way. That's a pretty bold proclamation, I know, but it just seems odd, that it can be bigger than its source material in a way.
Yeah, I agree. And, I mean, you were seeing that a lot in the 80s, a lot of slashers that were essentially just ripping off Halloween. I mean, after Halloween hit it big, it was all about, how can we
do that?
How can I get a piece of that pie? There's money there. Yeah. There's blood money there.
Camp blood money.
Yep.
So one of the first things I keyed into is the first-person perspective. I guess for some background reference for the audience, this was probably my first time watching the entire movie front to back without any interruptions and seeing it in its entirety. And I already knew the twist about Mrs. Voorhees is the killer, because that's almost unavoidable.
Yeah.
And I just didn't really know the first-person perspective was going to be such a key portion of the seeing through the eyes of the killer. And it kind of made me want more of that. Like, in a way, I wish there was almost a franchise that did that as its kind of, like, niche thing.
Like the whole time.
It would be very hard to... Yeah, because you always knew once you had that perspective, trouble was going to ensue. You just knew that was going to happen. And I think in a modern sense, you could almost do like a found footage kind of... You could kind of blend like found footage and like a first-person killer aspect. I think it'd be an interesting thing, and it really carried on also into later entries into the franchise.
Yeah.
And it was not what I was expecting by any means.
Yeah. I mean, that interestingly enough, I love that you brought that up first, because we already talked a little bit about, is this just a big ripoff? That is not something that they made up, right? Like, they took that from Halloween, which took it from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which took it from something else. And I think it's interesting that ended up being kind of a key element of Friday the 13th, where it didn't so much. Halloween, it kind of is, but in Friday the 13th, I think it really fits because there is this like murder mystery element of like who's killing everybody, right?
Who done it? Yeah.
And it works more because of the first person murder scene. So there's like no indication at all of who the killer might be. None. Which I think at times is to the detriment of the movie, because there's not enough clues. You know what I mean?
Or character, for that matter. I mean, you don't really have a character until the very end of the movie, until we're at the climax of the movie.
Right.
Which I watched this with my wife. I've actually watched all 4 of these movies with my wife, and she has gradually disliked me more as we've gone on into the franchise. I've gradually liked them quite a bit more, but that's a different topic entirely. She did not know about Mrs. Voorhees at all. Sure. Now, of course, the moment she showed up, she pretty much was like, oh, I get it now, because it's like when you finally see Mrs. Voorhees, it's like, oh, I remember that Jeep.
Yeah.
So it kind of, pieces 1 and 2 together. We gotta talk gore.
Of course.
I could not believe the quality of the gore in this movie. I just was, I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was.
Yeah.
I mean, the first scene we see with Annie, that throat slit, I was genuinely was just like, wow, that was better than I expected.
Yeah. I mean, that is a huge component of why Friday the 13th got as big as it did, right? Their effects were just better. You had Tom Savini, who in the 80s was like a superstar, doing the special effects for the original Friday the 13th, and then again for part 4.
And which is very noticeable.
Absolutely. It shows. And it's part of what made Friday the 13th stand out, right? Before Jason came around and he became, his own, rock star character, the violence was the character. The gore was the reason why you went to see Friday the 13th. It just had more interesting kills and more of them. A lot of slashers have a very low kill count, like 5 or less. And Friday the 13th movies are like bodies everywhere. But the gore is great.
And bodies found in interesting ways too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That was going to be one of the questions I asked you is, did this was this a noticeable difference compared to others within its own genre?
Yeah.
And obviously it sounds like a yes. In terms of like the gore side of things.
I would say yes, but they're less so after this came out. After Friday the 13th, that kind of showed people, how it was done, I would say. And slashers really saw an absolute gigantic renaissance after Friday, where Friday was a Halloween ripoff, but then a lot of movies were Friday ripoffs, right? And so you had these there's multiple tiers of who's inspiring who, but the violence and the gore became the reason to make a slasher, right?
How can you do something new, something fresh?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of slashers are they're like haunted houses or thrill rides, amusement parks, right? It's just, how can I get to the next interesting kill and have a story that makes some thin modicum of interest,
Some
just
sort
to
of
get
through
me,
line.
just to get me to the next kill. And you see this even with the later Friday the 13th movies. Once Jason starts coming around, he kills people in the first 10 minutes. There is no build up. There's no waiting. You're just killing people the whole time. That's the whole point.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
That'll be a thought for later entries I just had there. Overall, again, like I said, the gore was just surprisingly good to me.
Absolutely.
Not seeing the axe impact, but then just seeing the face with an axe in it, it was much better than I thought it was going to be.
It's disappointing at first, and then you're like, no, it's pretty good.
Well, and then I thought it's 1980 when this comes out. I'm trying to think in the time period, because you kind of have to do some amount of disbelief suspension,
for sure,
given the time period. We would be remiss if we did not talk about the arrowhead scene.
Yeah, I mean, that it's the only on-screen kill besides Mrs. Voorhees, right? Where you see the entire sequence of gore. Of course, Kevin Bacon, poor guy. But every other, every kill up until that point, it does happen off-screen, technically. Even Annie in the very beginning, the killer is in front of the camera
Yeah.
and then she's dead, and that's like how they do the effect, and that's super cool, and you don't really notice it so much when you're watching it.
Mm-hmm.
But then Kevin Bacon just being totally stabbed through I mean, it's great. It's so iconic.
They get you because he gets blood on his head, so you think he's gonna like go and look and see what's going on, but then he just gets stabbed through the throat. That's one of the better scenes I've watched in the entire horror spectrum we've been exploring here. Oh yeah,
wow.
That scene is way up there for me. There's a few others that come to mind. There's one specifically in this franchise much later that comes to mind. We'll get to that.
Is it in part 2?
Jason X?
Oh,
yes.
Jason X. Okay, yeah.
You already know. What did you think about the music?
I mean, it's good. I mean, I actually think that, something... I've been a Friday the 13th fan since I was a kid, right? I remember when I was, I think, 10 or 11, you bought me every Friday the 13th movie that had existed so far on DVD for my birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like the first 11. It was everything except for the remake, because the remake wasn't out yet. And so, I've been a mega fan for a long time, and this was the first time when I was watching the first movie where I thought, the theme is a little much.
It's just the thing. It's tropey in a way, Well, not in a way. It is tropey. Yeah. If there's music, there's probably a kill. If there's not music, it's just tension with no kill release, and that's just very tropey. That's a part of the genre. They really stick to that through and through in the later movies that I've been discovering. Sometimes better. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But I just, it definitely was a bit much for me. I don't know that I was ready for it to be so like music, music. It just didn't work as well for me. But, I mean, that's a pretty minor gripe, all things considered.
For sure. So. And I think it helps that the music is pretty good. It's just, at times, maybe a little overbearing. But it is typical of the genre at the time as well. So it's hard to fault it for it. But watching it today, it's noticeable, because horror movies just aren't like that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get into our character, really our only character, which kind of ties into the climax as well, with Mrs. Voorhees. What did you think? Walk a veteran of the entire franchise and horror writ large. How is she?
How is Mrs. Voorhees?
Yeah, let me know.
So I think that she's interesting because she is phenomenally well acted, and it kind of comes out of left field because she is so much. I'm Mrs. Voorhees, she's so much better than the rest of the cast, right? She just was, and I think that she brings an air of believability to the unbelievable concept that she would be running around the forest killing people successfully. There is something about like the core idea, and the reason why the twist works is because the core idea of it is like, it's unbelievable that you have these 20-year-old counselors that are getting murked by a 60-year-old woman is insane. But it works
with the worst sweater, terrible haircut.
It works because she sells it, right?
Yes.
She's not a great character otherwise, like on her own, I would say. I mean, I think that it's hard to put all of the pieces together, I think. But she's, Betsy Palmer, she's incredible in the role.
What monster could have done
Oh, yeah. Her little tics with like, kill her mommy.
Yeah.
That's like good. That is good horror in any kind of capacity. That's just, it's so disturbed, and it's in part so disturbing because it's sad in a way, in a big way. I mean, it's her kid dies because of neglect.
Well,
and she takes revenge.
It's been 20 years, and she's still...
Yeah. She still has not gotten over it, and rightfully so. It's her delivery of her iconic lines is not overbearing. It's not overdone. It's succinct. When she's on the screen, you're just like, okay, you're all in on what's going on with her.
Yeah.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
All right, so let's back up a little bit here, because we do have other characters that, while they don't have character, they do die, and this is a horror movie. We enjoy seeing these kills.
Yeah.
Ned, I think is one of them.
That's the guy.
Is he the one? Is he the one that's above Kevin Bacon, or is he the one that gets like plastered to the door with arrows?
He's the arrow guy because he shoots the arrow.
Love that
in the beginning. Yeah.
It's this movie with those off-screen kills. It does a lot of. It makes you wonder because you have to think. So this 68-year-old woman puts this guy up on a wall and just nails him into a wall.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of silliness in this. There's a lot of silliness in this movie, and some of that does come through in the first-person shots, like specifically the lead camp counselor, the older guy.
Yeah,
that's there, where he's like, "Why are you out here?" And he just gets stabbed in the gut. Like it plays like a comedy in some aspects.
Absolutely,
and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's this franchise is about camps, and it's campy in more ways than one, and that's part of what I love about Friday the 13th is the camp, right? Mm-hmm. So far as characters go, though, I want to say that I actually really like Annie. I think that she has the unique job of being a character that you're supposed to care about and kind of supposed to think that she is the main character. It's almost like a psycho move that they go with her. And she also has some of the most interesting personality. I mean, she's like fully fledged. I think you do care about Annie by the time she gets killed. And she's probably the only character in the whole movie that I feel bad about. Everybody else is like, they die, they get killed. But Annie's like,
they're bog standard.
It's too bad, Annie.
Yeah, it's definitely unfortunate. And the way that they set her up is wonderful.
Absolutely.
She's already hitchhiking. She's hitchhiking somebody else. And the moment you see the first person camera, you're like, oh no, Annie's not okay.
I know.
It's not gonna be good for her.
Really makes you wonder why that guy didn't just bring her all the way to the camp.
I know, right? He's like, I ain't going close to that camp.
Yeah.
No way, no how. I mean, in his defense, 8 people died there that night? Pretty solid call that he avoided it.
That's true. What do you think about Alice as the final girl? And more importantly, what do you think about Alice's game of strip Monopoly?
When they said that, I literally rolled my eyes and was like, well, okay, you're a bunch of 20-somethings bored. I guess so.
I think that game of strip Monopoly, where they're all smoking and just playing, does more to characterize those counselors and set the stage for the types of characters we're going to be getting for the next 11 movies. That scene does that more than any other scene in the whole movie.
I can see that.
I love that scene. I think it really it's funny. It's funny. It makes them feel like people, which a lot of the other scenes don't. And I think that's something that is needed in slashers. You want to make the characters be, personable, and that scene does it.
If they're not relatable, it's hard for you to feel much of anything when they inevitably take a knife to the chest.
Yeah, exactly.
You need some sort of connection to them, and if that's not there, it's not as visceral.
For sure.
So Alice as a final girl.
Yeah.
Well, in her whole sequence with Mrs. Voorhees as they're fighting back and forth, I asked myself twice, why didn't you just brain her right then and there? You hit her in the skull? with a cast iron pan. Go pick up a cast iron pan, listeners, viewers. Go pick one up. It's like 15 pounds. You could kill somebody with that thing. And she hits her once, and then it's just like, la-di-da-di-da, I'll go to the beach. La-di-da-di-da.
She probably thought she was dead. She's like 60 years old.
I mean, I guess, but just double tap. We learned this. Just make sure the work's done. After that, the head cut.
Mm-hmm. The final shot. My biggest issue with this, and I know that you have issue with this scene. Yeah. I think my biggest issue with that part of them fighting is Alice is like 15 feet away from Mrs. Voorhees, and she picks up that machete, and then Mrs. Voorhees immediately just goes and she just like stands there and like waits for it. It's like,
exactly,
she needed to be way closer to Mrs. Voorhees to make that part of the sequence believable. It's like, you're telling me that she thought she couldn't do anything, she had to just like wait it out.
Whoever was handling blocking on set that day, you fucked up, man. You really made a boo-boo here, because it's forever. It's a forever distance.
Yeah, it's way too far.
And my other thing with the head cut is, it's like, maybe not the worst gore, but it's not good either. It's weird seeing that in the same movie as the throat slit in the very beginning and the arrow puncture. Seeing that specific decapitation is oddly bad, considering the quality that we already have throughout. So that's kind of my main gripe with it a bit. I think it looks pretty good for an on-screen decapitation in 1980. I guess my reference point for decapitations is mostly from like probably the 90s, 2000s onward.
Yeah,
I don't have as much of a reference point in 1980s slasher head chops of any kind. So
it's hard to do a decapitation. You don't see them, that often.
Yeah, especially in this time period. I get that.
I think it works relatively well. I think it works well because Alice is very successful. You know, I think you often want to see your final girl be successful, like even more so than just escaping, right? Which is how all of the other Friday the 13th movies go. You know, she really wins, you know?
To clarify, I do like Alice as the final girl. I think that is well. It's just that specific part of the scene I'm a little more lukewarm on. But her getting away, kinda, is good.
Kinda?
Well, did Jason actually get to her? It's ambiguous.
No, I don't think it's ambiguous.
Really?
Yeah. How could it be?
Why do you think it's not?
Because I think it's not for a lot of reasons, right? Mm-hmm. Reason number one, this movie takes place 20 years after Jason is dead, right? Sure. So even if you assume that he's still alive, which the later movies force you to assume, he wouldn't be a child, right?
Yep.
Nobody else saw him, right? He wasn't in the lake when they pulled him, when they pulled Alice out, right? I think that it's easy to assume that Alice is delusional at that point, right? After such a long night of death and destruction, that
watching all your friends be dead in horrific ways.
Yeah. And I think especially putting the context of the sequel in mind, it's hard to say, like, oh, is that boy Jason, is he real? Like, how can he be? Jason is like 30 years old in the next movie.
Yeah. 30
and that movie's only 5 years later, so.
Yeah, I gotcha. So when you first saw this movie, I mean, how long ago would that be for you?
Like 20 years.
Okay. Did you jump when Jason hopped out of the water? Did the jump
probably.
Okay.
Probably.
I did. So I can say definitively that I did, and so did my wife. We both were like, fuck. Like, it got us. It got us good.
You didn't know that was coming?
I did not know that was coming.
So besides Kevin Bacon's getting Kevin Bacon's death, and besides the fact that Mrs. Voorhees is the killer, right, which is like the big trivia question.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
That scene is that's the iconic part of the movie. It reminds me kind of Exorcist 3 in some ways, where it's like, you can debate the rest of the movie, but this one shot is very, very good. It's like undeniably good. Mm-hmm. It's a great jump scare, I think. And we talked about it earlier, the music, but like the music sells it. Like that is probably the most effective use of music in the entire movie.
As we come near the end of our autopsy, we have to ask the question, is this movie essential to Friday the 13th, the franchise as a whole? So as I said, in the past 24 hours, I've watched 4 Friday the 13th movies, all consecutively.
Yeah,
for the most
for your
part.
first time.
Yeah, so I dived into basically our first arc of Jason entirely, and I gotta say, I think it's got to be essential.
You think so?
Yeah.
Why?
And I say that because it starts what we then get as we go on. If you don't have some sort of basis, it's what is part 2 if we don't have a part 1? You know what I mean? It doesn't have anywhere to go. Now, I could understand if you would say no, it's not, because how much does this movie matter considering how much it changes, especially from 3 onward comparatively. I could see that argument, but I would still say I think the first has to be essential because it sets the stage for us to get Jason as we know it.
Okay. I disagree.
Okay.
I think that this, in the weirdest way, Friday the 13th the first one might be the least essential out of all of them. And it's because I disagree that it sets the stage for the sequels. I don't think so at all. I don't think that it lines up anything for future movies except for some very minimal references. I think that you can easily start the franchise with number 2, and it tells you literally everything you need to know, and even shows you most of the first movie.
Wasn't ready for that.
We'll talk about that more in a couple of weeks, but I think that because of the way that the second movie starts and because of the way that the rest of the franchise goes, you can easily skip the first movie. And also, I'll be honest and say that besides a couple of cool kills, the first movie is just a lower quality movie, I think, than the sequels. It's just not as good. Do I like watching it? Yeah. Will I watch it again? Yeah, I've seen it like 100 times, but it's not as good as the sequels.
I get you. I respectfully think you're totally wrong and crazy, but that's okay.
I think a lot of people probably think I am, and I'm okay with that. Hit me up. At me. At Corbangerang. I don't...
Calling him out. I like that. Well, this has been the first episode here of Franchise Dissection. Our next victim on the stretcher is going to be Friday the 13th Part 2 because, well, of course it is. We're doing the whole franchise. That's going to be up in about 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, you can always catch up with us in our Discord. All relevant links are going to be in the description. Corbin, thanks so much for being on here.
Of course. I'm happy to be here, man. I'll be here in 2 weeks.
Love it. Looking forward to it.